All right. Hey everyone, today we're going to be reading chapter 11, and I hope everyone's having a good day, but we're going to start with the Statement of Unity. Preface. The U.S. was founded as a colonial settler state based upon white supremacy and slavery, stealing the lands of indigenous nations, breaking every treaty made with them, and confining them to reservations, concentration camps. As the country became more powerful, the eagle sunk its claws onto other nations, making war on Mexico and grabbing its northern territory, invading Cuba, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and the Philippines, and either annexing them outright or making them colonies or neo-colonies. And in the 20th century, it became the major imperialist power in the world, exploiting both the people within its boundaries and those in every other country, bullying them with military interventions and robbing them of their right of self-determination. As Huey P. Newton stated, we have two enemies to fight, racism and capitalism. Between the two, capitalism is primary. Racism is a byproduct of capitalism. The working people of the world of every ethnicity or nationality face a common enemy that is destroying life on Earth. Our enemy is a small ruling class of property owners controlling most of the world's wealth and resources. We have our basic needs met. We must have our basic needs met to live a good and meaningful life. Food, shelter, health care, education, freedom from oppression by the state, and peace with other nations. To attain these essential things for life, we must have the power to see to it that the abundance that is available is shared equitably. And oh, hello. I'm sorry. I'm going to screen share. I'm sorry. I forgot to do that. Can you guys see that?
I can see it perfectly fine.
Statement of Unity for the Second Rainbow Coalition. The legacy of the First Rainbow Coalition dates back to its founding on April 4th, 1969 by the original Black Panther Party, original Young Lords, and Young Patriots organization. A number of other organizations joined this coalition not too long afterwards, such as the American Indian Movement, Brown Berets, Rising Up Angry, and the Red Guards, and others. Since the founding of the United States, the masses have developed a number of popular movements that came together to fight back against this capitalist imperialist system in various ways around particular demands. Nevertheless, none had established a movement quite like the First Rainbow Coalition. This historic movement was the first of its kind that established a model of class struggle like no other. Its charismatic leader, Chairman Fred Hampton of the Illinois chapter of the original Black Panther Party, stated, "At the end of the day, we weren't engaged in a race struggle," he said. "It's a class struggle, goddammit." By uniting with the various suppressed ethnicities and masses, they were able to bridge the gap between the various ethnic communities that white supremacy had long sought to keep divided. This class solidarity equipped them with the material basis and class consciousness to see their common class condition. Therefore, the necessity to form a united front against their common class oppressor, the capitalist imperialist ruling class. The ruling class viewed this as the greatest threat to their class rule and subsequently used the entire repressive force of the state, police, courts, jails, prisons, and intelligence agencies, etc., in order to crush this emerging revolutionary socialist movement. We refounded the Rainbow Coalition on May 14th, 2021, with the intent of withholding the legacy of the original Rainbow Coalition. We believe that this historic example is the model for the united front that will best serve our class liberation by upholding the 10-point program of the original Black Panther Party, which was subsequently adopted and later expanded by the original Young Lords, Young Patriots organization, and all other original Rainbow Coalition members. We establish our programmatic unity. The 6 disciplinary rules that we uphold ties all organizations and our coalition to a common professional discipline. History has bestowed upon our generation a common class mission to fulfill. The representative of the capitalist imperialist ruling class, represented by the Democratic Party and Republican Party, cannot liberate us. It is their class intention and entrance to uphold our common class oppression. Therefore, it is only we, the oppressed masses of all ethnicities and nationalities who must build the necessary class solidarity, class consciousness, organizational structures, and a united front that will ultimately liberate ourselves. This is what the Second Rainbow Coalition is committed to. This is the historic mission we intend to fulfill. Dare to struggle, dare to win. All power to the people, boots on the ground. The 6 disciplinary rules. 1. Members will conduct themselves in a manner to bring credit to the coalition and will treat others with respect and politeness. 2. Members will be sober when on Rainbow Coalition business and will not engage in any criminal activity while a member. 3. No member will engage in violence except in the extremity of self-defense. 4. Members will not gossip nor be divisive to the unity of the Second Rainbow Coalition. 5. Members will not act as informers nor work against the purpose of the Second Rainbow Coalition. 6. Nobody is authorized to speak for the Second Rainbow Coalition unless authorized to do so. All members of the coalition, New African Black Panther Party, White Panther Party, Green Party of New Jersey, Poor People's Army, La Mesa Nacional de Brown Berets, Fury, Nassau, New Era Young Lords, Guardian Rebellion, American Indian Movement, Northeast Woodland Chapter. Welcome, Zen. So today we're going to be reading chapter 11. If anyone wants to read or has anything to say, please just speak up. Don't even raise your hand. I mean, there's only 3 of us. So chapter 11, one hell of a smoke signal. We will not leave this building of injustice. We are prepared to die right here. Our women and children have taken this risk for 482 years. They are used to it. The police are waiting to storm the building. They are listening to our drums. They are welcome. Floyd Young Horse, Lakota. The idea was born on a beautiful sunlit day at Crow Dog's Paradise on the Rosebud Sway, I'm not sure. Sway Reservation. It was August 17th, 1972, shortly after the annual Sundance, the most sacred of all Plains Indian ceremonies, which is happening like right now. Did you guys know that? A few of us, Lakotas and AIM members, were sitting under the pine branch covered arbor of the dance circle. Some of us had pierced our chest and given flesh offerings to the Creator. Our wounds were still fresh. We talked about our lack of power, our inability to run our own lives, and about how the Bureau of Indian Affairs in Washington, D.C. still ruled over our tribes and treated us as wards of the government. We felt that something had to be done, something big, to get us out from under the heel of the government. And so the idea of a great Indian march to Washington was born. It is said that Robert Burnett, ex-Marine and twice chairman of the Rosebud tribe, first thought of it, but in a medicine way. The idea of such a march had been stirring in the minds of half-dozen American Indian leaders. As I remember it, it was Bob Burnett who gave the march its name, the Trail of Broken Treaties. Presidential elections were coming up in November. We hoped that after we arrived in Washington, we could persuade both presidential candidates to make a commitment to American Indian independence. The caravan, I'm sorry, guys. The caravan would be the biggest undertaking that Indians had ever made. It would require the cooperation of many tribes, organizations, and persons in leadership positions. We decided to have a large meeting soon in Denver, Colorado, with as many participants as possible to make the idea born at Crow Dog's Paradise a reality. During the second half of September, a number of involved persons came together at the New Albany Hotel in Denver to carry our plan a step further. Our meeting happened at just the right time in the right place. A number of other Indian groups were already in town having their own meetings and conventions. The National Indian Brotherhood from Canada, the National Indian Lutheran Board, the National Indian Committee on Alcohol and Drug Abuse, and others. Bob Burnett, Reuben Snake, Vernon and Clyde Belcourt, Russell Means, George Mitchell, and I were there. Many American Indians who had come to discuss issues of Indian people both on and off the reservation were staying at the New Albany Hotel. We had 300 people upstairs to help decide how to organize this march. I felt that 300 were too many to agree on anything, so I gathered a smaller group of some 30 people downstairs for a strategy session on the ways and means. We had to decide on the main purpose of our march. The group resolved to represent the government with a number of demands to meet our basic, most important grievances. We also had to name the people who would be in charge. We elected two co-chairmen, Bob Burnett and Reuben Snake, who was a Winnebago from Nebraska, an AIM member and director of National Indian Leadership Training. Anita Collins, a Pau Shoshan from Nevada, who was AIM's national news editor, was elected secretary, and Lavana Weller, a Caddo lady from Oklahoma, the first woman president of the National Indian Youth Council, became treasurer. Finally, the question of how the march was to be organized had to be settled. I suggested a caravan starting from the West Coast, winding its way across the country and ending up in Washington, D.C. In the end, we had 3 large caravans starting from different points to join up in Minneapolis for a last-minute strategy session, which was to last 4 days. Then the caravan would begin the final leg of its trip to Washington. Clyde Belcourt was appointed to handle the logistics for the caravans as they entered Minneapolis. One caravan led by Sid Mills, a young Yakima Indian and decorated veteran who had been badly wounded in Vietnam, was to start out from Seattle, Washington. Sid had previous experience from organizing a fight for Indian fishing rights at Frank's Landing near Puget Sound. Another leader of this caravan was Hank Adams, an Assiniboine and founder of the Survival of American Indians Association. He had been shot and almost killed by white racists the previous year while he helped Indians in their fishing rights struggle on the Nisqually River. Russ Means was the third leader of this caravan. Once their caravan reached South Dakota, it would join a caravan from San Francisco, California, led by me. A third trail from Los Angeles, California, would be led by my old friend Bill Sargent in Ojibwa and by Rod Skinadora and Oneida. Their group would come through reservations in the Southwest all the way to Oklahoma, then join the other 2 caravans at St. Paul, Minnesota. I insisted that all caravans stop at as many reservations as possible, picking up people who would join the trail. We later found that we had stopped at no less than 33 reservations. The trail people also visited sacred or historic sites such as Wounded Knee. At the end of that planning session in Denver, I emphasized the spiritual aspect the trail must have. Each caravan should be led by a medicine man, carrying the sacred pipe and drum. Drums would beat night and day to remind America of the 372 treaties that had been broken. After the planning meeting, I drove with a friend to San Francisco to organize things there. We had to find our own funding to get things started. On our way, we stopped at various towns and told people that we would be passing through again with the caravan. We asked, "Can you give us some help? Can you put us up overnight? Can you feed us?" We made contacts along the way wherever we could. I planned to come with a drum so that we could sing some songs and have blanket dances along the way to raise gas money. When we reached San Francisco, we headed directly to the Indian Center. There, I met Dave Chief and Gail Running Crane, 17, from Montana. They asked if they could join the caravan. I said, "You are too young. You have to get your parents' permission." Many other young people at this center were determined to join the caravan. A number of these teenage activists proved their enthusiasm for our cause by getting permission from their parents to make the cross-country trip. Meanwhile, I kept in touch with Russ Means in Seattle and Bill Sargent in Los Angeles to see how they were doing. We left San Francisco on on October 6th in a caravan of 5 cars crammed with people, many of them young and traveling with their parents' blessings. I felt like a mother hen as I tried to keep our little caravan together and moving without losing a car. Our first step was Dekanawidya Kusa Hotel University at Davis, California. They made us feel welcomed and held a big dance where we took up a collection. We were soon on our way to Reno, Nevada, when we talked with a lot of Indian people and picked up a few more cars for our caravan. Then we continued to Winnemucca, Nevada, to Stanley Snake's place and had a sweat and pipe ceremony there. By that time, we had 10 cars in our caravan. Each time we stopped, I would check with Russ and Bill to see where they were. Bill was off to a slow start, but Russ was moving along. My caravan arrived in Salt Lake City, Utah, to a large welcoming crowd of students, among them 50 or so Indians. One was a striking Navajo girl named Angie Begay. Later on, she and I would form a relationship from which would be born a beautiful daughter, Arrow. We went to the Mormon church and made an unsuccessful plea for a good-sized amount of money to support the trail. Our delegation was denied admission and locked out of the Mormon tabernacle. Such treatment was not surprising, considering that for centuries, Mormonism had defined the indigenous people of North America as godless savages. Many Mormons thought Indians were unfit to bring up their own kids, and for decades, these people ripped Indian children from the arms of their parents to be brought up properly by good Mormon, God-fearing parents. For this reason, in some tribes, Mormons are called child stealers. AIM demanded money from the Mormon church as reparation for the suffering it had inflicted on Indians. At about the same time that we were asking the Mormon church for some help, the National Park Service was refusing to request of Russ and his people to erect a cast iron plaque honoring the Lakota and Cheyenne warriors who died during the Battle of the Little Bighorn and on the Custer battlefield in Montana. As my group left Salt Lake City, we picked up some more cars and then we all drove south to the Ute Reservation. There were more people joined us, increasing our caravan to 20 cars. Our growing caravan wound its way to Denver, where a big powwow was held for us. Then we headed north into Wyoming. From there, we drove on to Pine Ridge, where Dickie Wilson, the tribal chairman, had declared open season on all AIM members daring to set foot on his reservation. We, of course, drove into Pine Ridge anyway, and we picked up more people. While we were there, we heard that the northern group had already come all the way up to Pine Ridge and would meet us over at Wounded Knee. We had stopped on the side of the road when somebody at the tail end of our caravan started hollering and waving his arms around. He had seen Russell Wagon's train coming. We all converged at Wounded Knee in 45 vehicles of all kinds. A woman came up to me and pointed down toward the ravine where in 1890 so many helpless Lakota women and children had been massacred by the 7th Cavalry, Custer's old outfit. If you go there at night, she told me, you can hear the ghosts of those murdered people wailing. I believed her. More and more Lakota people arrived at Wounded Knee. Leonard Crow Dog, AIM's spiritual leader, came from Rosebud with about a dozen people. Frank Fool's Crow, the oldest and most respected among the Lakota medicine, arrived from Kyle on the Pine Ridge Reservation. Chief Red Cloud also came in from Pine Ridge, while Leonard Petler joined us from the Turtle Mountain in North Dakota. From the little hamlet of He Dog came 17-year-old Mary Ellen Moore, who later at Wounded Knee would give birth to a baby boy. Old grandfathers and grandmothers came. Young women with small children came. The trail of broken trees had snowballed beyond our wildest expectations. By the time we left Wounded Knee, our caravan had grown to 85 cars with more than 300 people staggering over miles of highway. We didn't know then that 4 months later we would be back at the knee under very different circumstances. When we got close to Minneapolis, the Oklahoma column merged with ours. On our way through Minneapolis, all of our different caravans finally came together. We had a big meeting in St. Paul chaired by Reuben Snake. 150 tribes were represented. Sorry, guys. We put together a number of working groups to write position papers. Out of these, we formulated our final demands, the famous 20 points, which we intended to deliver to President Nixon. During the 4 days we were in Minneapolis, we held a half-hour drumming and singing rally that blocked all traffic on Fifth Avenue. There was a big building under construction in the vicinity. There were cheers and laughter from our group when we saw a crane operator put up a large sign on the 20th floor. It read, "Custer had it coming." We had Bob Burnett, George Mitchell, and Anita Collins to precede us in order to make an arrangement for food and shelter, as well as to enlist support among civil rights groups, church organizations, and especially among politicians and government officials. Russ, Clyde, and I were supposed to keep the caravans moving and prevent straggling, which was not an easy task. Our 4-mile-long caravan made its entry into Washington, D.C. during the pre-dawn hours of November 2nd, 1972. We had asked for a police escort but did not get it. We decided that, before doing anything else, we would make a wake-up call at the White House. We drove through downtown Washington with about 60 cars, honking and tooting as loud as we could. We got to the White House around 6 a.m. and circled it. We put out a 6-man drum and raised our voices in a war song, letting Nixon know we had arrived. Then drove into the capital city, still blowing our horns. We got our police escort in a hurry. We were all dog-tired. Most of us had driven all night. I had not slept in 24 hours and could barely keep my eyes open. We just had to get a few hours of sleep. We had been promised good accommodations and plenty of food, but things went wrong. Somebody led us to a church. Before we entered, Leonard Pelter pointed out something at our feet, a dead, run-over rat, some welcome mount. We were told to go down into the basement where we spread our bedrolls in the dark. I had hardly relaxed when I felt something crawling over me. At first I thought it was a cat, then I saw it was a rat, the biggest I had ever seen. They were all over the room. "There are rats down here," one of the women screamed that a rat had bitten her baby on the arm. Oh, heck you know. A young girl yelled, "There not only are a lot of rats down here, but thousands of cockroaches too." An elderly Ojibwa lady complained to me that the toilets were broken. We had people in wheelchairs and on crutches with us, and there was no place comfortable for them to rest. Martha Grass, a feisty Ponca woman from Oklahoma, mother of 11 and grandmother of 15, came to me with a young boy she had brought along. They were shivering. She said, "Here it is November and there is no heat. Over at the BIA, there are bureaucrats. Those bureaucrats are warming their asses on soft upholstered chairs. They have beautiful offices where they sit comfortably behind big shiny desks and never do a damn thing for us." She went on, "They want us to starve to death or freeze. I'm tired of being kicked around. To hell with it." Clyde said, "This is the worst than the worst slum in St. Paul." Bob Burnett was angry as hell. He said that he had gotten so many promises of help and good accommodations from organizations and individuals, but they had all renegade on their word. He knew it was because of pressure from the government. Clyde said, "Enough of this bullshit. Let's get out of here. Let's go have a talk with the BIA." The Bureau of Indian Affairs building was the logical place to go. It seemed as though all of us automatically drifted to that place. The building itself was a large 4-story chunk of white marble in the so-called federal style, like most government buildings in Washington. Broad stairs led up to an imposing triple entrance portal. It stood on Constitution Avenue at 19th Street, just a few blocks away from the White House. Across the avenue, the needle-like Washington Monument rose from a large grassy area. Slowly, more and more Indians drifted into the BIA buildings as if drawn by a magnet. They came in by ones and twos or in groups. At that time, we had no intention of occupying the BIA. We simply had no other place to go. By dawn, 600 or 700 Indian people were lounging in hallways, lying sprawled on sofas, falling asleep in chairs, or standing around a big statue of a chief, arguing and not knowing what to do. A few people who had food with them improvised some breakfast. We finally met up with Bob Burnett, George Mitchell, and Annetta Collins, who had been sent ahead to set up interviews. They had been in D.C. and New York City for almost 3 weeks. I had told them to arrange meetings with the Interior Department, the Department of Labor, Department of Commerce, and all of other offices involved with Indian affairs. Annetta told us, we have set up all these meetings as planned, and now all doors are closed to us. I don't know what's going on. They are holding out on us. Bob Burnett started ticking off all the meetings he had lined up that had subsequently been canceled. He told me there's something strange going on here. A week ago, I had confirmation that we were going to meet with all these people, and now they act as if they don't know us. Something is wrong. The persons we had appointments with seem to have backed out under some kind of threat from the administration. Our people started to get impatient. They were tired and stressed out from the long journey. They needed to have food and water and a good rest. They were getting more and more riled up. Martha Grass yelled, "Let's get those BIA people down here. Let's find out why they are not meeting with us." Finally, around 11 a.m., some minor official came down to see us, or maybe he was only an aide to some minor official. I told him we are supposed to have a meeting here at the auditorium. He said, "You Indians are not even supposed to be here." Another low man on the totem pole bureaucrat joined in. He answered all of our questions with, "I don't know." We called people we knew, such as Senator Edward Kennedy, Hubert Humphrey, and Walter Mondale, but nobody was willing to meet us. At noon, I went out to see what was happening on the street. I found the entire avenue in front of the building was filled with additional trail arrivals. There were cars and school buses from Siston, South Dakota, and more from Oklahoma, a big group from North Carolina, native people from White Rocks, Utah, and every kind of vehicle from all over the country. I said to Clyde, "Man, this thing is getting bigger by the minute." Some young men had set up a drum in the auditorium. The drum beat and singing began to reverberate throughout the building. At about 2 p.m., some BIA people came down from the second floor and announced, "It's official. The government agencies don't want to meet with you at all." That's when people got really angry and started yelling and cursing. Martha Grass began shouting again, saying, "Get the commissar down here. Get the commissar." At about 3 p.m., Lewis Bruce, the commissar of Indian Affairs, came down in person. Lewis Bruce is a fine and decent man. He is half Sway and half Mohawk. He sympathized with us, but he had no power. The government had tied his hands. When he read to us the memo from his superior, Assistant Secretary of the Interior, Harrison Loesch, which forbade him to give us any assistance, there was complete chaos. People began yelling and screaming, not at Bruce, but at what he represented, the federal government. The memo stated that he was to give no direct or indirect assistance to the American Indian Movement demonstration in Washington. Loesch emphasized, This is to give you very specific instructions that the Bureau is not to provide any assistance or funding, either directly or indirectly. We definitely were not welcomed in Washington. Bruce had no part in the government's position with us, and he was willing to help us. He said, "I cannot support the decision of the government. I just can't defend it." About 30 of us went upstairs to Bruce's office, including Bob Burnett, Martha Grass, Russ Verman, Clyde, and Carter. Bob told Bruce, "Harrison Loesch, Assistant Secretary of the Interior, assured me that the government would give us local support." Bruce phoned Loesch, who said he did not recall any such promise. After the call, Bob shouted, "Loesch is lying through his teeth." At that moment, Loesch phoned Bruce back and ordered him to clear the building of Indians and close it down. Bruce looked sad and angry. He told us that he would not follow orders, that he was the Commissioner of Indian Affairs, and that his job was to help the Indian people, not to throw them out. He told the people assembled in the auditorium, "This building will remain open to all Indians." There was a huge roar of applause. Bruce said he would keep the building open all night. Loesch and others phoned repeatedly, ordering him to leave the building. Each time he refused. Finally, he was told that if he was relieved of his position as commissar, he said that it did not matter, that he would stay. Russ and I had a meeting outside the BIA building with a man who was reported to be from housing. I said, "Where are we to stay? We will not go back to that rat-infested church." He said, "Well, that's your problem. We didn't invite you. We didn't tell you to come here. We're not in the housing business." Meanwhile, someone had some calls and said that we could stay in some armory. He gave us an address. This time, a few of our people checked the place out first. They came back in no time saying that place is just as bad as the church, like a tomb. It's like being in a freezer. It has no cooking facilities, no shower, and the toilet facilities are totally inadequate for our crowd. Much was going on simultaneously in different parts of the building. People had begun to spread out. A few women discovered a cafeteria in the basement and started brewing coffee. Small tribal groups settled down in empty offices. By then it was past 5 p.m. Most BIA employees had left, many ahead of quitting time because they were afraid. In the auditorium, Russ made a speech. Carter made a speech, and other people made speeches too. But it was Martha Grass who had made the point that this is the BIA building. This is an Indian building. This is our building, and we're going to stay right here. So the decision was made that we would stay the night. Up to that time, the building had not been taken over. It was crammed full of Indians because they had no other place to go. They were simply waiting for a resolution to negotiations. All of this changed instantly when a scuffle broke out between Henry Wawasuk from Kansas and a lieutenant from the Metropolitan Police. Wawasuk had been speaking with Black civil rights leader Stokely Carmichael, who had come to offer his help when Metropolitan Police officers tried to enter the building. Wawasuk would not let them inside. The lieutenant had gotten into his head to clear the ground floor of the Indians despite Wawasuk's refusal, and so he called in a platoon of heavily armed guards with helmets and billy clubs. They forced their way in, clubbing down everyone who tried to resist. People had blood running down their faces from the beatings. Some of our people tore the legs from chairs and tables in order to defend themselves. Outside, riot police looking like men from Mars with their helmets and face shields began to surround the buildings as reinforcements for the guards battling us inside. Pretty soon, word reached the group upstairs that the police were storming the building. I looked at Russ and Clyde and said, "Seal off the building." Russ shouted, "Close all the doors." We ran down the stairs to the main floor into the building of the fight. Our people were driving the guards out of the building. Some of the police panicked and jumped out of the windows. Others were trapped inside, and some of their fellow policemen clubbed their way inside again in order to rescue those left behind. There was some hard fighting going on. At last, we kicked their butts out. Once the building was clear, I urged our people to barricade all doors with whatever was available: desks, chairs, table, photocopy machines, lockers, and file cabinets. Soon we had the whole building sealed off. Meanwhile, the police outside had cordoned off the whole area, letting no one get near. We were masters of the building. The occupation of the BIA building entirely changed the spirit of the trail. At first, the Interior Department was in charge, telling us what to do. Then suddenly, we were in charge. We were no longer there by default. We had become occupiers. Those of us who had been meeting in Bruce's office joined people downstairs where I announced, "This is a takeover, and we are going to stay here until we get some answers." The people vowed that they would defend the building. It was ours then. By then, the reporters had begun arriving. They wanted to talk to Clyde Belcourt, to Russell Means, and to Dennis Banks. The takeover became big news worldwide. That first night, I went downstairs to see how Henry Wawasuk was doing. He had a cut on top of his head, and his knuckles were raw and hurting. We talked and visited, then found an empty room and made our space in there. I didn't have a sleeping bag, but I had a blanket, and I found a pillow somewhere. I told those who had come with my caravan to settle down somewhere they could find a place to settle down, wherever they could find a place to plant themselves. Some of our men and women saw themselves on the 11 o'clock news that night as they watched coverage about the takeover. I settled down and went to sleep, wondering how long this occupation would last, wondering what would come of all of this. About midnight, word came in that we could stay one night, but we'd have to vacate the building in the morning. They would use force if we didn't leave then. From then on, we would have 2 moments of crisis every day, about 9 in the morning and 6 in the evening, when police would arrive, threatening to eject us by force. The next day, we got up early and had some coffee. Support started to come in from the Black community. They brought in sandwiches, hot dogs, cold drinks, and all kinds of supplies, saying, "This is going to be a long haul." On the second day of the occupation, November 3rd, we put up a big sign over the entrance. The BIA building became the American Indian Embassy. We also set up a teepee on the lawn in front of the building. We hosted an upside-down American flag up the flagpole. A row of young secretary guards stood in a line across the pathway leading to the entrance, controlling who could come in and who could not. Strangely enough, the police did not interfere with people going in and out of the building, nor did they stop the various demonstrations taking place outside, some in support and some in opposition to us. At about 10 o'clock at that second morning, we let the press in. We appealed to the media to let the country know the reasons for the takeover and what our demands were. We made speeches to them from the stage of the auditorium and gave interviews on the steps outside. If necessary, we used a bullhorn, and we dressed up for the occasion. Russ wore a red shirt with a beaded medallion over his chest. An eagle feather dangled from one of his braids. Clyde wore a black, wide-brimmed Uncle Joe hat and a bone choker around his neck. I draped a colorful Pendleton blanket over my shoulders. The one in our group most interviewed by the press was Floyd Younghorse, a Minnetonka Joy from Eagle Butte, South Dakota. Because of his classic full-blood face, his red wrap braids, and his fine sense of humor. He told reporters he had come to an Indian car with so many things wrong with it that it shouldn't be up and running at all, but somehow its spirit was keeping it going. On the second day, more people joined us. John Trudell, a Santee Sioux and AIM leader, arrived, as did LaDonna Harris Kweowakamoche, who was president of Americans for Indian Opportunity and wife of U.S. Senator Fred Harris. Carla Blankley from Salteu people and her daughter Sherry, the chief Orin-Loyans, with a delegation of 6 Nation people. Many non-Indian supporters also came. Black Power advocate Stokely Carmichael was the first, then Black activist Marion Barry, who later became the mayor of Washington, D.C., Jim Williams, a spokesman for the Black Panthers, Dr. Benjamin Spock, who wrote what some folks called the Bible of child raising, and Wavy Gravy, the merry prankster and his psychedelic bus, arrived with people from the hog farm in New Mexico. He wore an earring the size of a small egg dangling from his left lobe. Richard Erdos came from New York City with his wife Jean and 2 teenage sons who were toting a tidy kitten they had rescued from the highway on their way down. Erdos said it was just his style to take over a building with a purring kitten in his arms. On that second day of the occupations, tensions multiplied, soon becoming almost unbearable. A man in a fancy uniform appeared, waving a paper at us. It was Chief U.S. Marshal Wayne Colburn, with whom we would have to deal a few months later at Wounded Knee. He had a court order requiring us to vacate the building by midnight. Colburn was scared. We could see the fear in his eyes when we confronted our young men, homemade spears and clubs in their hands and their faces painted for war. He was actually trembling. He cried, "I come in peace. I have no choice but to carry out the court order." But he did not carry out his threats. Attitudes hardened on both sides. Negotiations got nowhere. Things got worse and worse. The government offered us the large auditorium in the General Service Administration building a few blocks away. There we would have comfortable quarters with all the facilities we needed. We accepted the offer and sent some people to check it out. They found the doors locked. A government spokesperson explained that the doors would be open after a complete and peaceful evacuation of the BIA building. We didn't fall for it. We felt sure that once we left our present quarters, the auditorium would remain locked while the BIA would move to reoccupy its building, leaving us nowhere to go. Our anger burned red hot. Excitement and fear of bloodshed were in the air. Increasing numbers of police in a solid mass 5 ranks deep stood steady to attack us. Another marshal appeared with one more order to clear out or else. We had about 700 people in the building. Many had armed themselves with homemade weapons, rebar and fishing rods with knives tied to the tops, clubs made with chair legs, some bows and arrows found in a closet, golf clubs and whatnot. Some people piled up as many as 60 typewriters on the roof and upper window ledges. They also gathered loose roof tiles and filled trash cans with boiling water to hurl down on the heads of police if they dared try evicting us. We tapped the windows so they could not be shadowed by tear gas canisters. We taped the windows, Many girls and young women stood ready to fight alongside the men. 17-year-old Mary Ellen Moore tied a letter opener to a broom handle. "What do you suppose you can do with that?" one of our young security guards asked her. "Get them in the balls before they get me," was our answer. The drum was beaten. Crow Dog blessed the warriors with sage, and then he fanned them off using an eagle wing to fan smoke from the burning sage towards the men to bless them. A number of our men had painted their faces for war with lipstick if they could find nothing else. I knew that the police outside with their helmets and flak vests realized they were not facing a bunch of flower children or student anti-war protesters. We were dead serious. During the second day, some Oklahoma people requested a private meeting with some of the leadership. So we went up to the second floor to find out what they wanted. They told us, "We uncovered some information. We have been sitting in this office all night long, going through the files in those metal cabinets, and we discovered how they have been ripping us off, stealing reservation oil and natural gas out of Oklahoma and also Wyoming." I told them, "Start making copies of everything and let's take it out of here. Anything you can find that might be incriminating evidence, let's make copies of it. Let's take it with us." Pretty soon we had boxes and boxes full of documentation. Before dawn on our third day inside the BIA building, I told the government negotiators, "We will not leave. We will fight. We will die here if we have to." We weren't leaving until someone in the government, other than an aide or intern, was willing to sit down and talk with us and hear us out. "We have now declared war on the United States of America," said Clyde Belcourt. "We are ready for battle." We held a quick leadership meeting and decided that the elders and children must be protected. We sought to have the oldest and most infirm, as well as the youngest children, seek safety outside the building. Between midnight and 4 a.m., government officials made 3 offers to provide for these people, but most of them decided to stay. Only a very small handful left to find shelter at the YMCA. The night passed uneventfully. As dawn came, many of our young men finally flopped down wherever they could find a little space and tried to get some sleep. The now former Commissioner of Indian Affairs, Lewis Bruce, was staying with us. He said, "I cannot defend the bureaucracy of this country any longer. I'm staying with my people." I remember November 4th as the day on which strange things happened. Once again, the marshal appeared with a new restraining order. Government officials declared that we were going to be ousted by force. Secretary of the Interior, Roger Morton, issued a statement calling us a splinter group of militants. He said, "It is so obvious to me that the seizure and continued occupation of the building are nothing more than a form of blackmail by a small group which seeks to achieve through violent means objectives which are not supported by a majority of reservation Indians." Outside on Constitution Avenue, a group of marchers had come to show support. They formed the weirdest support group we ever had. It was led by Reverend Carl McEntry, a right-wing nut who shouted, "Hallelujah, we have a message for our Indian friends. All right, you Indians, we want you to have your rights as long as you're not commies. Support the war of Vietnam," they chanted. "Onward, Christian soldiers," and began to shout repeatedly, "Free Morton, free Morton, Morton come down, we want you freed." It was not clear whether they had thought we held the Interior Secretary hostage or whether they had confused Morton with Louis Bruce. Clyde shrugged his shoulders and said, "Just another demented freak." Also on this day, we finally got a call from the White House. Leonard Garment, Nixon's advisor on minorities, wanted to meet with Bob Burnett, who they thought would be easier to handle than guys like Russ, Clyde, and me. At the same time, Brad Patterson, another Nixon aide, met with George Mitchell, Anita Collins, and Hank Adams. These talks led nowhere. I realized that we might not be able to stay much longer and that I should concern myself with the documents we had discovered. In the end, we ran out of copy paper and took the originals. The evidence filled a good-sized room. During the night, we backed the U-Haul van right up to a rear doorway and started loading it up. When we were done, we parked the van near the edge of the BIA building's parking lot, where we hoped it would escape attention and be available to be moved out of a moment's notice. November 5th was a stalemate. We demanded to see President Nixon and John L. Richmond, Nixon's top domestic affairs advisors, but they sent the usual low-level flunkies. We wanted to discuss our 20 points. They offered to let us use the auditorium during reasonable hours, take showers, and do our cooking in the cafeteria. This was comical as we were in full charge of the building. I told Clyde that things would end in a battle because both we and the government had boxed ourselves in. We cannot afford to give an inch now, and they won't either, I said. November 6th. Oh, 1 second. Guys. November 6th, we were hanging by a hair. Judge Pratt said we had to leave the building by 6 p.m. After that, marshals would arrest all Indians who remained inside. We had fire hoses ready at the windows. There was a rumor that we had the building wired for destruction. It said we had enough dynamite from the Black Panthers to blow the whole place sky high. Later asked whether this was true, Vern told a reporter that smoking had been restricted to the basement. Outside the building was ringed by police wearing not only their helmets and black vests, but also tear gas masks. A lawyer acting on our behalf appealed the court's decision, warning of the dreadful possibility of bloodshed. Margaret Miller, an elderly Indian woman who was the only BIA employee had continued to work throughout our siege of the building, appeared with a machete ready to fight on our side. "Unlock it!" On our side, Secretary Morgan told the press. Siege the building, appeared with a machete ready to fight on our side. Secretary Morton told the press, "The Indian militants have done things their way. Now we will do things our way. Everybody involved in that building will be prosecuted." Anger and frustration were rising to a fever pitch. Our people were tired of hopes and tricks and broken promises. The atmosphere inside became chaotic and beyond control. Some of the younger people started trashing the building, smashing the BIA's expensive, elegant furnishings, and ripping up the posh leather couches. Frustrated activists covered the walls with slogans. One read, "BIA, I'm not your Indian anymore." There was a serious discussion about whether we should burn down the building. Mary Ellen Moore said to me, "I am willing to fight for what I believe in. I am willing to burn this building down. If that will not change the ripping off that the BIA is doing." Clyde was against burning it down. I said the government would be happy if we torched the building with all the incriminating papers proving how our land had been stolen and how we were cheated. They would be glad to have more excuses to prosecute us. On the other hand, if the police made a final, all-out attack against us, then whatever happens, let it happen. Russ said, if we go, there's going to be one hell of a smoke signal. This building is not going to be here anymore. Those of us who were against intentionally burning down the BIA won out. For a while, it looked as though we would have to fight for our lives. A large army of vehicles drove up and parked in various places around the building. Police cars with flashing lights drove back and forth past the building as if waging psychological warfare. I shouted to observers on the other side of the avenue. I invite all of you to stay and witness the massacre about to happen. At 5 p.m., it seemed the government was still determined to make a full-scale assault. However, at the last moment, the deadline for leaving the building was extended another 48 hours. It was all, after all, the night before presidential election. A few dozen dead Indians wouldn't have looked too good on that occasion. Sometime afterward, a young Indian woman from New York wrote in a letter to AIM. During the time we waited for the pigs to come, we sang and danced. We were waiting for the moment we would die if necessary. At 5 p.m., we had what we called our last supper. I thought, at least we won't die with our stomachs empty like so many of us had while we were alive. I had to go to the bathroom, but no one was allowed to leave our battle station. Some of us were stationed outdoors. I went around where there was some bushes. It was just like home anyway to go to the bathroom in those bushes. The police never came. She added, finally, our leaders decided we could all go back in the building. Tired and relieved, we went to sleep. The administration finally sent some top-level officials to negotiate with us. Fred Carlucci, head of the Office of Management and Budget, Leonard Garment, Nixon's advisor on minorities, and Secretary of the Interior Roger Morton, who we called Secretary of his limousine, came to the BIA. At last, we hammered out an agreement. Under it, the White House would set up a task force to seriously consider our 20 demands. The task force headed to Frank Carlucci and Leonard Garment, who would sit for 6 months and review every aspect of Indian policy. It would be made up of officials of all government agencies dealing with American Indians and would consult with our representatives every step of the way. Also, we explained we would need $66,000 for travel expenses to get all of our people home. I don't remember who came up with this sum, but the government paid it to us in cash. Of course, the government later reneged on their promises. They rejected our demands as impractical. They publicly reviled us for our radicalism and for the damage done to the buildings, though the extent of the damage they cited was beyond any damage we had done. We suspect the building was further damaged after we left to make us look worse, by whom we don't know. The government also convinced a number of tribal chairmen, Uncle Tomahawks, and hang around the fort types who depended entirely on government handouts for their livelihood to condemn us as a splinter group that did not represent Indian people in general. In spite of all of this, members of 200 tribes and 24 Indian organizations had come together in unity to try to make a change and to break the Bureau's power over us. The Trail of Broken Treaties was the biggest show of strength by our people in 100 years. Before we left the BIA building, one of us had taken a crown and had written in bold letters on the large movie screen in the auditorium, "We do not apologize for the so-called destruction of this mausoleum, for in building anew, one must first destroy what is rotten. When history recalls our efforts here, our descendants will stand proud." So it was the 6th day and time to go home. The government bribed us to leave with promises that were broken almost as soon as they were made. They promised to seriously consider our 20 demands, but soon officially and formally rejected all of them. They promised not to prosecute trail members for actions taken during the occupation, but broke this promise too. claiming their agreement did not cover the theft of government property. The documents we had seized, the trail of broken treaties, ended as a trail of broken promises. The racist and ultra-conservative press called the action a failure, saying that AIM and the trail people had lost faith in the sympathy of the public when the building was trashed. They also called the occupations a defeat for the radicals who achieved nothing. We did not see it that way. For everyone who had taken part of the Trail of Broken Treaties, the takeover had been a victory. For the first time ever, members of some 200 tribes had acted together for a common cause. I was proud to have been a part of this. If nothing else, we had sent up one hell of a smoke signal. Whew.
That was beautiful. That was awesome.
Yeah, it was.
Like, holy fucking hell, you know, just hearing that and just seeing them actually putting in that revolutionary militant potential into actual practice and actually implementing on it. That's what we need nowadays. You know, that's what we need right now. We need to become as militant as possible in order to combat the growing and amping up of fascism within the U.S. You know, and reading that, it just inspires me more. You know.
Yeah, most definitely. And I love how, like they didn't really like accomplish what they wanted, but at the end, he's still so happy that so many of his people came together for the first time in such a long time.
Exactly.
Take those revolutionary acts for their people,
Exactly. That radicalization, even if they, even if they didn't, because let's be honest, here the government was never going to actually, hear to their demands. They were never going to do it. The government and the state as a whole is just a hired gun of the bourgeois, and if it contradicts and opposes the profits of the bourgeois, they just simply won't fly. So unfortunately, their demands were never going to be met. Revolution and militancy is the only solution to this oppressive, disgusting, reactionary, fascist government. But even though they failed in that aspect, even if they fail in the aspect of the government not adhering to their demands, they still managed to radicalize and show the masses and the people of the U.S. that that this is possible.
And
that
they
can
still
fight
stand
back
together. Yeah, and they still stand together, and they can say that they're a small group of militants or whatever, but at the end of the day, they know they got so many tribes and organizations to come together.
Yeah, exactly.
To take over that building for 6 days,
Exactly. For a quote unquote small band, for a quote unquote small band of militants, they sure did put up a fight,
Yeah.
So.
And I'm looking forward to hear what the documents, like, I mean, we all know like what it ends up being, but to hear it from his words, what the documents are gonna turn out, what they do with them. I'm looking forward.
No, 100%. This right here, and obviously, when it comes to revolution and class struggle, it's all a process. This what they did, what AIM did, it didn't just happen overnight. They didn't just they did people didn't just back them up because because they said so. No, this is them building up that class agitation, that organization, that radicalization of their people and of the masses, because AIM actually showed the indigenous people of the U.S. and of everyone that they give a shit about them, that they care about them. And once that connection was made between AIM and the people, the people fell in line with the ideological and fell in line to the ideological and political line of AIM. That's what that is building up class consciousness right there. Actually implementing theory through praxis. And that's what we need right now, and that's what the Black Panther Party did, and that's what we need to do right now. for our communities.
Most definitely.
That solidarity that they formed there was absolutely beautiful and inspiring, and in turn helped actually grow the movement that much further. Like, okay, this takeover of the building might have only lasted 6 days. The government might not have conceded to their demands there. However, it spoke volumes to everybody who was watching and everybody else who was inspired by that to then later also take up with AIM and
Continue
start fighting a good fight too, you know?
Mhm.
Exactly. And it brought in connections, the Black Panther Party, other radicals, even political people who ended up being political leaders, you know, came
Yep.
supported them.
A united front.
So
That right there,
And it's
that's
beautiful.
what that's sorry.
no, it's okay. I just think it's beautiful. And you know, they danced, they kept their spirituality, they, you know, they still stayed a strong, united front, you know, like I just
Exactly.
it's beautiful.
You know, it's ironic, you know, and it just goes to show, you know, it's ironic how the government wanted AIM to get out of that building when that building, according to them, supposedly was meant was meant to help indigenous people. It just goes to show you that at the end of the day, the bourgeois and the state don't give a fuck about these communities. They don't give a fuck about indigenous people. They
Everything
don't
is
give a fuck
theirs.
about
Right.
what?
Everything is theirs. Like they don't
Yep,
care.
everything is theirs. Yeah, they don't give a fuck about indigenous people or black people or non-white people or just anyone really. Their goal is to uphold their own interests through by doing anything and everything. And you know, and if there was no other option, they would have massacred them all. If that's what it took, they would have done it because they don't give a fuck. They don't
Well,
care.
Well, but I find it kind of also like ironic at the same time, they weren't standing down and they gave them 48 more hours.
Yeah, exactly.
Like they were scared too. They
Yep,
knew
exactly.
they
They were
were
scared.
serious.
Exactly. You know, for like I was saying, for all that talk, for all that talk about how they belittled them and just called them a quote unquote small militant group, they sure did put some fear in the government, and in those police officers because if they were really just some small, you know, insignificant militant group, why didn't the police just rush them immediately? Because they were scared. They were
And
actually afraid.
Yeah, and they did get meetings with higher officials. So like obviously they were bending down to some of the demands. They were going
Exactly.
to. They were scared.
Indeed. You know, you know, this story, you know, as amazing as it is, obviously, you know, just goes to show you and just goes to emphasize more that reformism and the electoral college is not going to save us. You know, it's not going to save us. You know, the only way that we're the only way that our the only way that we're going to be actually able to live decent, happy, long lives is through revolution. It's through militancy. It's through uprooting and replacing this system with a new socioeconomic system where the people and the masses are in charge and not a small group of ruling class shitheads who want to see the entirety of the human race get killed off just so they can increase their profits by 0.01%. You know,
Yeah.
and you know, I'm just glad that that AIM is radicalizing more and more and more and more. I believe I said this the last book club we were in, but you know, in the very beginnings of this in like chapter like 3 or 4, somewhere along there, Dennis Banks said, you know, that he wanted to have like a peaceful protest, you know. But after he kept on seeing how the government was slaughtering and beating his people, you know, he started to radicalize more, you know, and you know, him and AIM started to become more radical and more militant and realizing there is no other solution, you know, and I just really like that.
Yeah, and I mean at this chapter we're 3 months before Wounded Knee, I'm pretty sure they said.
Yeah,
So, you know, that just comes to show the radicalization that comes.
exactly. But yeah, I don't know how long y'all want to talk. We're only 1 hour and 12 minutes in, so we're not like too far off. But again, we don't want this to turn to 2 hours or 2 hours and a half.
Yeah, no, I mean, if anyone has any last comments or anything, I was gonna wrap it up for the day, but
hmm
so I think it was a really good chapter, and I'm hoping to join you tomorrow, Zen.
Awesome. I would love that.
Me
I'll
too.
be here tomorrow as well.
Cool.
And sorry.
I just said cool beans. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no, it's fine. And actually, if it all gets wrapped up, and as we were talking before, Sister Cat, I'm going to try and see if we can start that book club in the UPM Discord server this upcoming Tuesday. So if you two want to join in on that, or if you can, you're much obliged to do so if you want.
Yeah, if I'm able to, I'll definitely hop in there.
Yeah,
I-
same here. Sorry.
Oh yeah, but like yeah, it's just beautiful, and I can't wait until we get to the part of Wounded Knee. I cannot absolutely wait for that. I have a question. So, I'm sure they're no longer around, but is AIM still around, or did they
AIM is
did they
still
dissolve?
around. We read it, if you, when we read the Statement of Unity, they're actually part of the Second Rainbow
Oh,
Coalition,
right.
the Northeast Woodland chapter. There's other chapters of AIM too without the country as well.
Hell yeah. I find that funny because I literally just searched, because the reason why I asked is I searched it up. I like a few minutes ago, I searched it up on Google, and it literally says that they're no longer around, which I find funny.
Oh no, they are. So yeah,
Yeah, the
This-
system would probably love to pretend like this movement doesn't still
No, yeah.
fucking exist, but it does.
No, yeah, it's the same way. It's the same way how, if you, and this kind of relates to AIM as well, but it's the same way how if you literally go and search up on Google, it will literally say on Google how oh, X indigenous group is extinct and they're no longer here, but in actuality they're still here, like it's like that as well. The system wants you to forget that before the settlers and before the fucking capitalist white supremacists came to this land, there were people here. There were in North America alone. There was as many as 500 million indigenous people living here, and now so many are just gone because of white supremacy and genocide and capitalism and settler colonialism. And they want you, and the masses want us to forget what they did. They want us to forget what happened to the people that used to be here. And it's just fucking disgusting.
it most definitely is disgusting, and that can go in with like our educational systems and what they teach us in public schools and book bannings and all of that. It's just disgusting how they try to control what we know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna stop recording.
Mhm.
So just so you guys know.
All right.
Thank you all for joining.
All power to the people.
All power to the people.